listeners, and welcome to High Tea Mystique with your hosts, Kat.
And I'm Tess.
And Pam.
In a world changing faster than the time it takes to brew a cup of tea,
High Tea Mystique reminds you that no experience is too big or too small to teach us something about ourselves. So join us for a cup of tea as we steep into adulting, womanhood, independence, and more.
you'd have to know if you were the type of person who crashes after caffeine, because I think that not everybody does. Probably the more often you have it, the least susceptible you are to the crash. But I know I crash after caffeine because I don't have it too often. More Coke now, though, than ever before.
I think it also kind of depends on which caffeine. Because like I felt myself crashing a little bit after the Coke that I just had right now. But with coffee, I don't.
Right. And coffee is something that you have more often than Coke?
I've actually been trying to stop.
Oh, really?
And have less of it, yeah.
More tea?
Just water.
Ah, yeah. That'll do it. That'll do it.
Hydration.
Tea has that. But so does coffee.
Yep.
Yeah, so does coffee.
Yeah. Depending on how you have it. But
I've cut down my coffee to matchas. And I only have matcha maybe once or twice a week.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Thanks for getting up in the morning really hard though.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of how I've been my entire life, which is why I've never really been a morning person. And it's the most ironic part of being, I would say, a captain for a morning run club. Is that I'm actually really not a morning person.
But you know what? Even with caffeine, I am not a morning person.
Oh, really?
No.
Oh, so
I
it
am
doesn't matter for her.
100% a night owl.
Yeah, no. I'm a morning person. If you're asking me to go to Disney and go to rope drop, sure. I'll be a morning person, but
Not even.
I won't be a morning person for like work. Like get up and have an extra hour to yourself. No,
Yeah. Yeah.
I won't.
I don't know. I feel like it's a great thing to reflect on. I feel like I might be actually transitioning a little bit more into that space because I feel like now my body just wakes up. So on days where I don't have a commitment in the morning, I will just kind of like be in my own because I'm like, I'm not ready. I can't go back to bed. I'm up now. So here I am, world. Take me or leave me. But yeah.
Take me on this ride or leave me here.
Yeah. I'm staying awake. So welcome everybody. I hope you're doing well. This is another episode of High Tea Mystique. And as usual, we like to start it off nice, cool, and casual and just bring you into where we're at. And I think that today in particular is going to be one of those days where we really want you to meet us where we're at. So we feel very called to today's topic. And I'm sure that we'll be able to find the highs and the lows, the fun and the not so fun in this topic. But ultimately, we just feel like these are some things that really need to be shared. And we feel like this is the perfect time to share them. So that being said, today's episode is going to be hosted by me, yours truly. This is Kat on the mic. And our topic is to ring in the season. It is officially the holiday season. We are even recording this episode on the very first holiday of the holiday season, which is a holiday that doesn't always happen around this time of year. And that's because it's Friday the 13th. Ooh. I love how we did not rehearse that. And for the record, we don't rehearse anything.
Nope.
Just disclaimer for anyone who might be listening for the first time.
It's always off the riff.
Yeah, extremely. So, yeah. It's the holidays are here. They are upon us, coming faster and faster every year. And so we thought no better way, don't worry. We've still got our same ideas coming, get ready for a really fun ride into the spooky season, get ready to reflect and kind of share in what brings us gratitude and the things that we love about the small parts of life. And then, of course, the warmth that comes with the winter. We're going to get into all of those things. But we thought that one of the best ways to start off the holiday season is to be reminded of the things we don't like to share. And so today's episode is called "'Tis the Season to Trick or Treat Yourself." And we actually really want to talk about seasonal depression. We think that, one, it's something that resonates a lot with all three of us in different ways for different reasons. And some of us are kind of struggling with it right now as we're transitioning in. So we didn't want to wait, any longer to talk about it, because as you guys know, we also heal a lot through just sharing our stories and our experiences. And it's important to show up authentically and say thoughts when you have them, because you need to speak things into fruition, and you need to speak in order to know how you really feel about things. And I say that for myself, but also for you all listening. And I really, really hope that if our podcast can do anything for our listeners and the parts of our community, it's to encourage you to use your own voice too, even if it's just with one of us as a friend on the side, or in our Discord channel, and kind of starting up a new conversation that was based off of something that we said in one of our episodes. But that is the topic for today. And before we get into the topic, we have a really cool tea that we've based around it. And this tea is something that I actually got from my last travel, because I did want to take a moment to shout out two pretty cool things that have happened since our last recording. The first is that Pam over here crossed the stage. That's the one I'm going to go with on how to word this to get her diploma for officially receiving her master's degree.
Woo, 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 woo.
Yeah. Applause, applause, applause.
Insert the Jonah Hill meme.
Yes, exactly. That gif. And then for myself, I finally competed in that marathon that everybody knows that I've been training for the past lifetime.
Woo, 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 woo.
And so, yeah.
Jonah Hill meme part 2.
It was awesome, and it was in Washington State. And after the race, in fact, the same day as the race, my crazy boyfriend decided that we would go on a 2-hour drive to Mount Rainier National Park in Washington. And so we drove there and stayed there for 2 days. And while we were there, we found a bunch of wild forage throughout just the entirety of the area, because it's so plentiful, because it's all based around Mount Rainier, which is an active volcano that has tons and tons of waterfalls, and there's so much life that grows there. And so we picked wild berries the entire time that we were there. And then upon leaving, I needed to make sure that I grabbed some natural stuff. So I picked up 2 different teas, one herbal and one tea-based. So we have a blend of wild elderberry tea, which is also, that's the one that has caffeine. So it has a Ceylon tea, which is native to Sri Lanka. And then we also have a fully herbal wild rosehip tea. So the reasons why they also pair really well with this topic is because, well, flavor profile wise, they're both very bitter. And traditionally, things that are bitter also offer antioxidants. Fun fact, like tea, right? Like the tea leaf. And the official benefits of them is that they can actually, rosehip specifically, but also elderberries, reduce your cortisol levels. And cortisol is something that can rise due to stress, right? High stress levels. And so the holiday season in general, but of course, when you're dealing with your own things that you feel like you can't share out loud, you're also raising those own cortisol levels in yourself by yourself. And so having something like this is just a natural way to soothe and relax yourself. Of course, always putting something warm in the body too, which is not the only way that you have to have this tea, but it is how we're having this tea today. And some other benefits, of course, detoxification, right? Because of the antioxidants, but these specifically target the liver and the kidneys. So like really, really cleansing of the gut, and getting it all out of there. And they also promote heart health, and they have immunity boosting vitamins like vitamin A. And so all of these things are just ways that we combat naturally, physically, the symptoms of depression. And one kind of thing that happens when you're depressed is that you neglect your own needs. And I think one of those things is hydration in general, so when you're able to, instead of having a cup of water, just adding something else to it, it's insane to think about how much more you could be giving yourself, even if it's 0 calories. Like there's so many benefits that just come from water itself too, because of trace minerals. And when you have something like tea, or even the benefits of coffee as well, you are serving your body for the good. And just an encouragement to keep doing that, you know, if you already are, and to consider making that little change if you're not. But yeah, so I think with that being said, we can go ahead and get started with the topic.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm ready. I already had the tea. It tastes yummy.
Yes.
And
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
ready
I'm
to
gonna taste
go.
it. Yeah, this will be my first time having it. I saved it to taste with you ladies.
Thanks,
See how
Kat.
it is. Yeah, of course.
So good.
Mm.
I'm already halfway through
Oh
my
my
cup.
gosh, it's delicious. The elderberries. Oh, so good.
Oh yeah.
And I'm so glad I got both because I was going to just get one, but I had no idea which one to get. And it was actually JP, shout out JP, who pushed me to get both of them. He was like, just get both, you'll use them. Because I also love, you know, if you've noticed that Pam has also been getting singular ingredients because it's been really fun to curate our own brews because, as you know, one, ingredients blend, right? And we've noticed with a lot of different blends that they'll have ingredients that we've had in other teas before. So it's really nice to just have the root source so that we can curate it based on those ingredients for what exactly we think we're called to use for the topic that day. So yeah, very cool. Awesome. So getting into the topic for today. 'Tis the season to trick or treat yourself. So I kind of already gave a little bit of an overview on what this time of year is and kind of how seasonal depression manifests in the body. But I think for maybe just for anybody who's not too familiar with the term or would like a refresher, maybe you're just in like a little bit of a brain fog right now. So I'm happy to kind of bring you in here with us. Seasonal depression is ultimately a mental and physical response to a specific time of year. And it can happen at any time of year for any reason because ultimately it's connected to your own personal tribulations in life. So it's connected to oftentimes the state of your finances at a specific time of year or memories that come up constantly because maybe there is some type of traumatic event that has happened to you at this time of year, and every time it comes around it's something that you can't shake. Sometimes people even forget that this event happens at this time of year and they can go years without remembering, and then they kind of get shaken awake with the memory of it, and kind of it actually can be quite healing when they recognize that this is why they always feel this way at this time of year. And we are talking about it now because the holiday season is statistically the most popular time for people to experience seasonal depression. And it is largely in part because of the culture that comes with the holidays. And I think that it's a blend of what kind of like pop culture and quote unquote society, right? So ultimately the society or the version of society that's being promoted to us via capitalistic outlets, you know, so businesses, stores,
Hallmark.
home. Yes, exactly.
Hallmark.
Like you kind of can't really escape it, right? It just surrounds you and envelops you the moment that September 1st comes around. And so for that being said, it's kind of like falling into this trap of thinking that you need to compare your life to what is being shown as an idealized version of what a happy life should look like, you know? And so when people are kind of forced to think that they need to confront this idea, they end up feeling like they've fallen very short because their family dynamic doesn't look like what the Hallmark commercials family dynamic looks like, or their financial situation doesn't allow for their table to look like what a Publix commercial dining room table, right, looks like on Thanksgiving or on Christmas. And also there are many people who experience broken relationships, and so the holidays are just reminders of things that they can and will never get back because those ties have been broken, and maybe for the better, right? Maybe they're technically healthier as a result of it, but because of that, their circle is smaller, you know, and other people have many loved ones that they cherish so much, but because of their situation, they can't be with them during this time of year when they crave seeing them the most. And so, just to, really paint that picture, this is why we want to talk about this, because these are huge and these are really, really heavy things that people go through, that we go through, us talking to you today. And we think it's really important to make space for that and kind of open ourselves up a little bit, maybe share some stories that you all haven't heard yet, as crazy as that can sound, because while we always feel like we've told you literally everything about us, we always find new little tidbits, and sometimes they're really, what's the word? Sometimes the wound is still open, or maybe have been newly opened. And so we want to bring you in on that. And I think that a really good way to start is by addressing our relationship with the topic of seasonal depression. Kind of just opening it up and talking about whether or not we've experienced it before. And if we have experienced it before, is it something that we've experienced once or twice in life? Or is it something that we kind of always come back to year after year? And I'll also take this time to say that if you don't feel like this happens to you during the holidays, please let us know if there's a specific time of year that you feel this way too. And I think we can have Tess start us off today.
So I am definitely of the seasonal depression. And it does happen around the holidays for me. Funny enough, I always had family members that their depression came around, the times of deaths of loved ones, and it was really strong for them around, my cousins lost their father, and that day for them was terrible. Like they would spend all day just trying to forget that had happened. But for me, it's the opposite, because it's not the terrible days, right? Like my mom passed away in July, and I've lived July, and I've always lived that day, and I always think about it, because it is kind of like a bookmark, right, in my life, and I'll always come back to it. But it's nowhere near as painful as missing the good things, like approaching, especially and this may sound odd talking about it now, but it's really prevalent for us because, and for different reasons, but and my reason is definitely, September is my birthday, October is Halloween, right? November's Thanksgiving, December's Christmas, January New Year. So it's hit after hit after hit pretty much for the rest of the year. So did you want to say something? I saw your mic go up.
It was literally just to say woo to your birthday.
Oh, Libra.
That's right.
So it's complicated. It's not mourning something terrible that happened for me. It's mourning what has been really good times of my life, and then kind of feeling the kind of broken bonds, things that were forged that are no longer there. Like what you were saying, Kat, before. I think for me it does happen every year too, which was the other part of your question. Like I know it'll happen every year at the same time because of the reason I just gave. Yeah. I have seen other people. I have felt it with other people. I've been, thankful to have good company around this time too, but there's still that tinge, of what was. And it's kind of developed because, I know I mentioned my mom, but my family has just kind of slowly, or some could say rapidly, but it all happened very spread out, like kind of folded in on itself. I had my mom, and then shortly afterwards I had like the best Christmas with my aunt, my paternal aunt. And then maybe 2 years after that, she passed away. So it was very hurtful, just because as a kid, it's like, and actually, I'm trying not to go on a tangent, so I apologize, but funny, it's not funny, but when I was a kid and 2001, right, July 11, 2001, My mom passed away. I went back to school the following August, and I was thinking to myself, like, okay, this is life, right? This is life post death of mom, right? And then maybe weeks later, 9/11 happened. And I thought, oh my God, this is life without mom. I literally thought like the world just caved in on itself. I was like so scared. I was like, oh my God, like, of course, this was not a coherent thought in my mind as a kid, but I can shape it now as an adult. I was like, how am I going to deal with all of this? Like, is this what just God thought now that my mom's no longer in the world? Like, everything else is terrible. So it was really quick and unfolding. And and of course, like, I didn't react too badly to it, but I know it was kind of a perspective in my head where I was like, wow, this is just like, this is what life is without my mom. And of course, 9/11 has nothing to do with that. And it's just the shift of mentality for a kid. But when 9/11 came around this year, I thought about that. I was like, damn, I thought about how my perspective had shifted. I don't think that was too much of the seasonal depression flavor, but I do think it kind of, unfortunately, is like the welcome mat to what is to come. But yeah, it is rough because, of course, for people who have seasonal depression, I think around the time of the holidays, all they're thinking about is, the public commercials, like you said, Kat. Did you guys ever have those Pilgrim salt and pepper shakers?
Yes.
That's a great childhood, Kat.
Yes. I also had a Santa, Mrs. Claus.
You had a Mrs. Santa Claus?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Salt and pepper shakers.
Salt and pepper shakers? You didn't, Pam? I didn't either.
No.
I always wanted them. I still see them at Publix, and I'm like,
Did you see
I
her
remember
eyes?
the
She just gave me-
commercials,
That's what I'm
but
talking about.
I never saw them in real life.
I want the It was just so sad. It's like, when are they going to sit next to each other during Thanksgiving? Because they're getting passed
Literally,
around.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, the commercials were so, yeah, but toxic, man. It's also toxic.
It is. Publix knows what they're doing, damn it. I still want that salt and pepper shaker. But yeah, it was
taken.
Yeah. But it was just I think which is funny because then you attach yourself to silly things as a kid. I know I did. I attached myself to those salt and pepper shakers. I was like, yeah, if I have them, everything will be okay. That's not true. Don't let the commercial fool you. But anyway, sorry. Back to the point. Yeah, it was watching those things, getting really attached to movies too. I feel like I am a child of the movie theater and cinema because I was always looking for like that epic fantasy, that great distraction from, a lot of what had just happened and occurred in my life. And of course, we all know that the majority of movie season happens, earlier in the year. And then, of course, towards the end, it's like maybe one or two more releases and then, academies. So maybe the seasonal depression is also the fault of Hollywood. I'm just saying. I'm just kidding. No, it's not. But
No, there's a lot of validity to that test. I honestly, I agree.
Well, yeah, I mean, I love movies and I really dealt into movies to kind of come away from like the immediate events when it happened. But yeah, and honestly, this is, getting ahead of ourselves, but movies is definitely something that I go to like help myself, reel through this time. Yeah.
And there are so many great artists, not just in movies but in fine art as well, who use escapism, right, through art as a way of healing.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes you need to stand, which we'll talk about later, sometimes you need to stand beside your pain in order to go through it and cope with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing share test. Thank you for kind of bringing us into your season.
Yeah.
And I think people will find a lot of comfort that you also experience it at this time of year, but that it kind of starts earlier for you.
For sure.
It's a longer season. It's more like a phase.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, that there's like an entire half of the year for you
Yeah.
that's very reflective.
Thanks.
You know, yeah, of course.
Yeah. I try.
Yeah. You want to pass it over to you, Pam?
Yeah. So I was really thinking about what seasonal depression means to me, and I feel like in the past, I've always loved the holidays, right? Like it's always something that I look forward to. As Kat knows, I would always have like some sort of holiday party, whether it was Halloween or Christmas, you know, like I always look forward to decorating all of that
Friendsgiving.
stuff. Yeah, Friendsgiving all the time. And I think that in more recent years, the way that seasonal depression has kind of shown up in my life is seasonal in a different context, right? I think it's seasonal in the sense of the time period that I'm at in my life right now. Because when I think about the holidays in the past, it was a lot simpler, I guess. Because when I think about it, I'm thinking about those moments when I was in my young 20s, right? And all that we had to look forward to, or that we thought about was, oh, having a good time or dressing to theme or all of us getting together. But since my early 20s, there has been so much change in my personal life. There's been a lot of growth. There's been a lot of personal growth. There's also been a lot of outgrowing. And so I feel like now it's almost a seasonal depression in a different context in the terms of age, right? That now that I'm in my 30s and things are starting to settle and certain realities are starting to come more towards the forefront that maybe didn't hold a center stage, right? Things like family, things like relationships, partners, like a home, like what does that look like? Um, and being somebody who born and raised in Miami, did leave Miami, had to come back, was in a long relationship, left it, right? Outgrew that relationship, went through another one, and now I'm in one that I call him my future husband. Like this is my person, this is who I'm gonna marry, who I plan to be with for the rest of my life. And being in a long distance where he is, you know, not a US citizen in a different country and the same sort of limbo that I've mentioned in previous episodes that I feel like I want to get my life started and I can't. And even the limbo of that reverse culture shock of coming back from Japan and trying to figure out my place here. I view it as that kind of seasonal depression, right? It's a season in my life right now, and it gets highlighted, I think, more so after the holiday season, because I feel like once the holiday season is here, I do get excited. I still very much love Halloween and Thanksgiving and Christmas, but now it's shifted from revolving those holidays around my friends to now more revolving it around family, right? And so now things are a little bit different. I have friends who are married and are wanting to start their own families and understanding that it's harder for all of us to find the time to get together or even the energy really um, for somebody to host something or do a lot, because now we recognize how much energy that took to set up everything and all the decorations, and it's beautiful, but at the end of the night it's like, is it worth one evening when the friend groups are no longer the same, when people may not even be drinking as much, or you know, it's a different time in our lives that we're all in, that is completely different to where we were almost 10 years ago, you know. And so when I think of it in those contexts, it's almost like a I don't want to say mild, but because it's more of a mutable depression, I think it could be a little bit scarier, right? It's something that I think is a feeling of stagnation that sits with me and has sat with me a little bit longer versus Kat and I have mentioned it in our podcast in the past, and at least for me, when I've had depression in the past, it felt a lot stronger, but it felt a lot stronger for less time. And so now it's kind of been, since coming back from Japan, trying to figure out, where do I belong? Where is home? Who is my home? Because home is not just a place, but also the person who I'm going to build a home with, right? And now I found that person, and now it's like battling all of these challenges of the reality of the context that we're in, and how is that home going to look like? Will we be able to have that home? How long do I have to keep waiting to have that home? And how long I already have been waiting to be able to build that home, to make those beautiful memories and make that lifestyle that I want. And it's just something, it's a seasonal depression that almost feels, it's still the same, right? It's that concept of what is beautiful and family and a bountiful home with love and laughter that seems out of reach, right? And then for me, it feels almost a little bit worse because I know it's within reach and I can't get it. Like there's an invisible wall, and it's things that are outside of my control, right? Like there's nothing that we can do about the legal system and of immigration. The length of the time is what it is, and the reality of how our relationship is just the reality of how we each have. And so when I think about seasonal depression, it's a little bit different, right? Like I know it's this time in my life, these few years that I have been living through, and I don't know if I can even say living, because yes, I've put in a lot of work. I've gotten a master's. I've gotten the job that I've gotten now, but it still doesn't feel like progress in terms of my life, right? Because I'm still living with my parents. I still can't afford a home, as is the reality of a lot of people in our age, right? And so just the reality of what that means, and when I could even afford these, in my opinion, basic wants, like if you think about it, the narrative of the American dream has always been to build your own home, right? Have the ability to work hard, afford a home that you want, and build the family. And now it's like, okay, I found the person. It's hard. It's going to take some time. We can make it work. But now it's the reality of, what does everything cost, right? What do these holidays really mean? What does it mean to build that home that I want? Can that even happen in the time that we're living, with the financial state that the country is in, and the reality of what it means to, really take out a home? And do I want to indebt myself and pay, even though I make good money, still feel like I might be, suffocating with a mortgage, just to create that ideal home that is being advertised in these commercials, in these movies, that they make it seem so easy, and that's what it is. And it's like, no, that's not the reality anymore. And so I think that my seasonal depression is more of, it's very reflective of the time that we're living in, but also the time of my life. And I feel our generation, specifically millennials, like coming into our 30s and almost realizing that I think the reality of adulthood is really sinking in for a lot of us. Because I feel that in our early 20s and mid 20s, there was a lot of the jokes and the memes of, somebody get an adult. It's like, no, you're the adult in the room now. And now I think we've all, as a collective, kind of accepted, for better or for worse, that yeah, we are the adults now. But it's not the same world that previous adults lived in, right? It feels so much harder. There's a lot more things that I think our generation, and obviously the future generations as well, are questioning, like, why does it have to be this way? Does it have to be this way? Is there anything that we can do to change that? And it feels a little bit hopeful and inspired to feel like our generation is willing to put that fight, and the younger generations as well. But I still think that it's this moment in time right now, very much how I feel, where there's still a lot that is against us, and so it's going to be a really big fight. And it's just that limbo area, right? Like that's how I think that's how that seasonal depression is showing up for me. It's just this feeling of being stuck, even though that I'm moving forward. We've mentioned this before, like when you have that dream that it feels like you're running, but you're running in place, and no matter how hard or how fast you run, there's just no progress. Like that's how it feels for me, and I think it really settles in, or has been settling in a lot more after the holiday season, because we have at least me, I have a whole bunch of birthdays in September, August, and October, because I am surrounded by Libras. And
Sorry, not
so
sorry.
Surrounded.
many,
We're only to your
so many. I think I have.
We're right here.
I could use my both hands to count
count, yeah.
all the Libras that are in my life and all the
hands.
birthdays that I have to celebrate during this time. And then we have Halloween, and then we have Thanksgiving, and then we have Christmas, and then we have New Year's. And then after that, I have my birthday, and I, like, if there's anything that you know about me, I love my birthday. I love celebrating my birthday. I always get so excited. And when I can't celebrate it with the people that I love, that makes me so sad, And so in recent years, because my friend groups and dynamics have kind of shifted and changed and evolved, my birthday has now become something that I used to be so excited for, and now it's a little bit bittersweet, right? On top of the fact that we're adding on this idea of, oh my god, I'm getting older. I'm 30 now. And then we add the pressure of, oh my god, I'm 30 now. I'm still living with my parents. I still don't have a family. I don't not, and then my own personal pressures of, I don't know when I'll even be able to live with my partner. I don't know when we'll be able to start our lives and start our own families, and how long will it take until I can actually start trying to have kids, and then by that point, how old will I be? What will those complications be? And so I I know, and I call it seasonal, right? It's a little longer and a little deeper than the seasonal depression that we've defined in the episode. But I still say that it's seasonal because I know that once I overcome these obstacles, like I will feel better, and I do understand, and I've thought about it, and I've sat with it, and I've accepted what my reality is, but I've accepted it because I know that it can change and it will change. And that's why I define that as seasonal depression, because I know that this is just a season of my life, right? Like it's not always going to be like this. Nothing is ever permanent in life, right? The only constant is change, but it still sucks, And I know that that's the reality of where I'm at, and the kinds of thoughts that go in through my head when I think about it. And it's honestly been really interesting to see and just reflect and become aware of how that's changed, because I feel like, for the people who know me and who have been in my life for a really long time, for the most part, I'm somebody who's usually happy. Like I'm always wanting to go out and celebrate and be with people and make sure like I have the best time when other people are having a great time. And I work so hard to make sure that when I do have an event or anything like that, that the people there are having the best times of their lives that they could possibly have, that everything is taken care of. And now I'm at a point where I'm like, I want to be a little selfish. Like I want to make sure that I'm in a place where I can enjoy my life and I can create this home for myself, this safety area that I can retreat to and build, and it'll be mine. And it's a little frustrating when I know that I can't get there yet, so there's a lot of feelings of frustration, a lot of feelings of sometimes defeat, but I just have to repeat to myself and let myself know this is only temporary. You know, we will overcome this. We've overcome other things in the past. And I think the beautiful thing is my previous depression, right? And the things that I've learned from that, I've been able to understand my own power and put that faith in myself. So it's almost also a little bit, it is healing and a little bit cathartic to know that I can depend on myself. I'm in a point where even though this seasonal depression feels like it'll be here for a little longer, it feels also good to know that I have grown in such a way that I know I will overcome this, that I know I have the power to push myself. And that is what I choose to focus on. And I think it's also because usually, at least for me, and I think a lot of us in Miami, the summertime is always great. It's always a good time. I feel like the summer usually is a great way for us to wash away that seasonal depression. And I always feel my best in the summer, and I love the sun. I love being out in the sun. And so once that lull of the holidays goes away, the springtime is kind of like, sometimes I get excited for it. But then once that summertime hits, I know, like, okay, we're going to have a great time. We're going to go to the beach. We're going to get a tan. It's going to be, you know, summer always feels like forever for whatever reason. So yeah, that's mine.
I really, really love what you shared, Pam. I think something that I'd like to highlight is how you, when you kind of touched on it just now again, but the difference from when you were younger to now. And you said that when you were younger, you would experience the emotion, but you feel like you experienced depression much stronger, but it didn't last as longer. And I'm sorry, you didn't last as long. I don't know why I wanted to create a poem with that just now. But now you mentioned how the periods are growing in length, but the emotions are not as potent. And I just want to take a moment there to highlight that the importance of this topic, these roots go a lot deeper than just saying the term depression.
Mm-hmm.
A huge symptom of depression, especially like clinical depression, is apathy. You know, people say that depression is sadness and sorrow, but it's actually the lack thereof. And I think what makes things very real, especially for the community around people experiencing depression, is remembering to do things that remind you of yourself and bring you back to who you are, because sometimes it is going to feel very numb, you know, especially like something like Pam said, right? Like a season or a phase in life that has no finite beginning and end. It can't be connected to a singular date or time of year. It's just something that you're experiencing right now. And just a reminder that, like, if you are feeling these things, please, please, please share with people as we are doing right now, right? It's a sign of growth and it's actually a sign of health, right? That you are trying to get better from it. And I think that a lot of what Pam, a lot of what you shared, you know, shows so much growth from who you say that you were, you know. And I say who you say that you were because I feel like, you know, somebody who has been your friend for that long, there were seasons where you had it that I might have guessed but never really knew, because where you were then was the type of friend who felt like you needed to hold that in, you know. And so, like, how wild to see where you're at now, right? That, like, a large reason of why we're talking about this tonight is because we know that it's important to share our stories and where we are. And there's so much to be gained from everything that you said. And I mean, not even just looking at it from that optimistic perspective, right? Because the wisdom and the prudence in saying that you know that this will pass and that you've taken the time and you've accepted that there is a light at the end. And so it's worth the struggle right now. How you feel like all of these achievements that you've had, I mean, nothing, because they're not what, like, what the what the ones that really set your heart on fire are, right? But that you've still gone out there and achieved them, right? That you've still put in that effort, despite having all of these feelings happening. Like, that's exactly what people need to be hearing who are listening to our podcast, because I know the numbers, on people who struggle with depression, and I've lived it. And it's so important to be reminded of people who, and it's so oftentimes some of the most successful people. It's probably influencers that you follow on Instagram. Maybe your favorite one who is literally struggling with depression right now. And that's exactly how they're combating it, right? Because they're struggling with it, but it is not overtaking them because they're battling, right? And you're literally watching them fight post after post with all of those little subtle ways that they're telling you how to take care of yourself, because everything people say to other people is something that they're also saying to themselves. Every word that we say on our podcast is also something that we're saying to ourselves. And for me personally, I am textbook. It's the holiday season. Um, I I love the holidays. We talk about this all the time. How much I love the holidays. And when
Isn't that ironic? And we all like love the holidays and we're all experience this then.
this feeling as well.
Yeah.
It's like with the highs come the lows.
The lowest of lows.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to mention that we're talking about this today for many reasons, but we've also touched on it before last year when we were doing our series geared around specifically Christmas, and we were taking all that time to reflect on previous episodes and just reflect on our lives and ourselves. We touched on, and we had an entire question centered around seasonal depression, and because of the responses that we got of how many people connected to us, we always knew that it was something that we needed to do an entire episode on and center on. And so the timing, as I mentioned before, was just really right for this one. So I want to kind of give a shout out to you, our listeners, for amplifying our thoughts and our voices and making us feel really safe to share all of these things, because we know that you genuinely want to hear our thoughts a little bit more deeply than what we shared previously. And so for me, I think that I experienced seasonal depression during the holidays, and it's predominantly tied to finances and family. Well, for one, I have really come into a lot of understanding about what my family dynamic is as I've gotten older. I think that as a kid, there was a lot of smoke and mirrors around the idea of my family. And as an adult, I'm sure my cousins can relate too. We've kind of been forced into the reality of what our family dynamic is. And the reality is that our family is built on a lot of falsehood and a lot of showing face, and actually relationships that don't go as deep as you thought they did when you were a kid, because everybody was very friendly in person and there were a lot of things happening behind the scenes, which is why now every single aunt and uncle that I have are completely detached from every other aunt and uncle. And so naturally, my cousins, who were once my best friends, are now people that I follow on social media, with the exception of less than a handful who I actually do stay in contact with. And while I love all of them the same, those few are the ones who really feel like family to me, right? Everyone else is more so just a person in my life who I care about and hope is always doing well, but I have no real relationship with them. And so when the holidays come around, I'm always reminded of many, many fond memories that I had as a kid where I thought my family was the public's family. The table was full, everybody was there. We had tables and tables of family members. We had extended family coming in. We had people flying in from all over the country to be there. And it was genuinely a festival, the holiday season, and taking turns going from one house to the next, right? So that everybody could host, because everybody wanted to host the family. And the reality I found out was tied to a lot of different reasons, some discrimination, some some were related to domestic abuse in the household and the way that certain family members viewed that, and others were related to finances. You know, certain family members were not in the same financial situation as other family members, and over time, uh, people were cut off, you know, not necessarily financially, but because of a financial state, right? It turned into an idea of who this person was, and now no longer. And that's kind of haunted me in my adulthood, right? This idea of financial stability and what that looks like, because I feel like I didn't have a very solid understanding. My family never talked about money. Which was odd because I grew up in a really nice home in a very good, family oriented area. And for years, I thought that my family was normal. And it wasn't until I lived with just my mom, because I lived with my grandparents for the majority of my adolescence, that I was coherent, because I do think that I lived with just my mom when I was like a baby, like first 2 years kind of thing. But she moved in with my grandparents very soon thereafter. And when I lived with just my mom and I, again being coherent, I really got an understanding of where I really was at in life. And seeing that was eye opening, but it was also at the wrong time of my life because I was in middle school. So to go into middle school and then realizing that you can't relate, you feel, right? Because it's middle school, like you can't relate to a lot of people because you feel ashamed of talking about your status. Because you feel like, I felt like my status kind of just like drop, and it really shocked me, and I didn't know who I could even talk to. Even some of my old friends, I felt like I was no longer the same status as them, so I was just always embarrassed to talk about it. And that stayed with me, for the rest of my life, essentially, right? So like all through grade school, just never feeling like I could talk about the fact that my family really didn't have much money, and that they were kind of like not really accepting that themselves, you know, like feeling like they could always find a way around it so that they could still live the life that they wanted, but always with that stress of like you're not living within your means, and at some point like you will have to make that change. And as an adult, I saw that happen, you know. And I will say that now, while my family is not in a perfect financial place, I do think that there has been so much growth, and I'm really grateful for that, because while my family is growing, I'm also growing, right? Like through seeing it firsthand. uh, but the unfortunate thing is that I unknowingly developed a lot of habits, because I developed the habit of thinking that I could do it too, right? That like, well, they didn't seem to have anything too bad going on, so I can give an extra swipe here and there, right? Because ultimately I'm just one person who's going to come for me. And thank God, knocking on wood, nothing has happened, right? As I like kind of went through that trial and error. But the one thing that happens without fail, almost every year during the holidays, is depression, because I literally cannot afford to do what I want to do for the people that I love. You know, and I've had years where I've felt more motivated than others with handmade gifts and really intentional, thoughtful offerings, you know, for the people in my life that didn't actually cost me an arm and a leg. But oftentimes it's usually just another pitfall that sends me farther into debt, because my I almost want to say my pride, you know, like feels like I still need to contribute to that ideal. Like I still need to do it because I'm a giver, and I love seeing that smile on that person's face, and like when I think of it off the cuff, I know exactly what they want, you know, and I can literally just give it to them. And the reality is that I'm trying to give them a thing as opposed to a feeling. You know, when ultimately the feeling would be the same with this, with that, with the other, because it's the cliche of the idea that it's the thought that counts. And so it's definitely something that I still struggle with, because I'm also somebody who doesn't find much drive for money. I really, really find drive in taking care of people, and like, I mean, right now my where I work is I wear many hats at my current job, but one of them is in community, and building community for the company that I work for. And uh my my passion in pursuing that part of my career was because I genuinely aim to connect with people, and it's a mission that I have in life, that I've always had in life, religious, out of religion, in limbo, everything. And I think that it's a blessing and a curse for me at times because I just want the people around me to be happy. And when I feel like I know what they want, I just want to be able to give it to them. And oftentimes it does involve money because it takes some way to get there. And I find myself oftentimes giving more than I get back, not in the grand scheme of things, but in an intrapersonal level, right? Like from one person to the other. I feel like I oftentimes end up giving and not receiving the same thing back but I find it okay because I have my partner, because I have my best friends and like they will always take care of me. And that is not the best mentality to have, especially with the idea of building your community, right? You shouldn't be overextending yourself for anybody at any time. I mean, Pam just talked about how long her journey was, right? To start thinking a little bit more selfishly when it comes to celebrating things like her birthday, like literally as simple as that of an example. And um, I think that it's really interesting that it's this time of year that I fall into that. I think it might have really become palpable for me the first year that I was officially feeling like I was living on my own. I think I mentioned that I was living with religious roommates, and they no longer allowed me to live with them when I told them that I couldn't claim myself as a Christian anymore. And that first, I mean, I moved out in November or like the end of October or mid October, something like that. And so I literally moved out in the holiday season. And so my first holiday season of officially living, like really just feeling like I was on my own, was fresh out of that. And so I remember those holidays just feeling so lost and in the unknown and very depressed, and didn't feel like I could share it with anybody aside from my partner. And I tried to find solace in my family instead, and was disappointed because, as I've mentioned, right, the relationships weren't there, and it was just a lot of lost memories from that couldn't be replicated anymore. And it's something that I have now. It's definitely recurring, and when it does happen every year, I think it's becoming more of hmm, a time of reflection for me. But it's this feeling. I think it's more physical for me, right? We're talking about the tea and all the things that it treats. It's more that I feel the symptoms physically, and now I can pinpoint exactly what they are. And so we'll see how this season goes. I'm feeling very open, to experiencing these emotions and letting them kind of come through. But I think that's actually kind of taking us into the next question, or really idea, because I kind of want us to take a moment to reflect on what we've all shared, right? As our version of what seasonal depression looks like. So take a moment to fully reflect on the expanse of what that period looks like for you. And in a moment, even you who are listening can take a moment to reflect on that. I'd like us to share a little bit more of what light you think there is for you, and I think we're kind of already there. I know Pam has already, shared the things that have been bringing her out, but to really center her on that, like what are a few of the things that have helped you to find peace and feel comforted through this time? I mean, do you feel like going through these things offers growth for you? Do you feel like it is something that you can say that you might be overcoming, or are working to overcome? I think uh I think this is a really profound time to share these things. And I think Pam would be a good one to start.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about before I go into mine.
Mhm.
Um and I think it contributes to mine as well. I feel like a potential reason, and a big potential reason why, right? Why you feel that way, and really why all of us in this room kind of feel that way, um, is because when you're a kid, right? Like when you're little, when you're a child, there's so much expectation of the adults in your life, right? And you have so much faith in them, in thinking that they have everything under control, or they know what they're doing, or all I have to do is, lean on parental figure, um and it'll be okay, right? Because I'm just a kid, I don't know, they'll know what it is. And then as you grow older, the reality of the show, because that is what it is, right? The show that they put on for these, for kids. So because kids are kids, they need to live their childhood. It all starts coming through, and it starts showing. And as you grow up, you start making these realizations of nothing is what it seems, right? Even the thing that you thought that was like so perfect, and all of, whatever it was, there's always a different angle that you can look at it and see something different. And so I feel like, for me, right, like I've kind of mentioned it, that I know this angle, the way that I'm seeing the picture, will not always be the same angle that I look at it, right? That I eventually I'll get to that point where I can see it from this different step, and this different angle, and this different position, and then I'll see something different, and I'll see something a lot more of what I envisioned. Um, and I think the way in which I know that I am overcoming it, and the ways in which I see the light, is none of it is easy, right? Um, a lot of, and again, as we've mentioned, a lot of it revolves around family, because that is what we get told, what we see, what is surrounded in every single commercial, every single movie, book, story that you hear during this time. Um, and understanding that that's just one part of the story, right? It's not the reality. There has to be, like how I mentioned before, right? Like there has to be, at least for me, a certain level of acceptance, of understanding that part of this story is broken, right? And it's meant to be that way. Every good story has a conflict that the character has to go through, and they grow from it, and there's a resolution, and eventually they come out with a solution, and then you get, you know in most cases, that happy ending and all of that. um and so part of mine is this huge acceptance and understanding of understanding my own family dynamic, and also not only just giving myself grace, but giving those adults that are in my life that same grace and that same forgiveness, of knowing that the same way in which I've been doing the best that I have could have been doing in all of these moments in my life with what I knew, they were in the same boat, right? Like in that same token, my parents have done the best that they could have in those moments in their lives, being parents who lived the immigrant journey in America, being parents who lived the um I forget the word, but being parents who lived through a government that completely robbed the entire country of everything, having have lived through war, understanding that they were raised by parents who fled countries and have also lived through war, and I feel like that's part of the huge growth part, and it sucks because my generation, right? Like my siblings, my cousins, we are the generation that kind of has to, for better or for worse, understand that, accept that, and then learn from it. And then on top of that, not only do we have to unlearn what we've been taught and learn these new things, but then we find that we also have to teach those adults, in our lives how to unlearn it and learn these new things, and adults who that has been their reality for the most part of their lives, and for some of the people in my life, like how to prevent that from trickling into the next generation, right? And I think that part of it is what's really healing for me and what helps me really see that light, because I definitely know that my family is not perfect and we don't have that textbook family dynamic, right? And I personally don't think any family does. But I have gone through a lot of just personal heartache, and I really just think it's just me, right? Because I think out of everyone in my family, I've really taken the time to take that step back and really look at my family for what it is, and really look at everything that was said. Like, look at the picture that they painted, try to figure out and question, why did they paint this picture, and then take that further step of, how did they get here, so that I can understand, how did I get here. And I have had conversations with my sister and with my cousin, about people, family members, especially the older ones, right? I think a perfect example is my grandmother. And I find that I have to remind them, be mindful and show a little bit of grace, and understand that the way that they are and the reasons, like their thought process, and the way that they view the world is very much a product of the world that they grew up in, right? And I have to remind them, like, well, think about how, what was their reality when they were growing up. Like, that is the reason why they view this, right, in a certain way. It's part of the reason why I'm also, it's the process that I go through to understand my parents' political views, right? Understand my parents' stances on certain things, understand my parents' reactions to certain things. And it's it's been an interesting journey, and it's also obviously been very enlightening, but it's also been very painful, because then it's almost, these may not be realities that my parents understand or realize, but just because I know and I see that, I almost feel the pain for them, like understanding that. I mean, I think the perfect example, or one good example of this, is when my dad had shared, I don't remember if, I think it was with me and my brother, but like one of the things that he had shared with us, and it's funny because as you get older, I think these parents and aunts, they start showing you the cracks themselves. Um, but he was saying how he never even saw his father smile or heard his laugh until all of a sudden in his early 20s, these two estranged aunts came from out of nowhere to visit, and they made his father laugh, and they made his father smile. And think about it, he lived 20 years, and he never saw his dad even smile, or I don't even know if he's heard the word I love you from him, or if you've ever received a hug from him. And so I have to take that information and understand, like, when those times come up that I do feel frustrated, right? Or I don't understand why certain reactions come up, I have to think about that and learn, this is why. And then if I genuinely want to be that light and make that change or get to that light faster, I acknowledge that I have to be the one to show them, like, I really have to put in that extra work. I, of course, also have to make that determination of if it's worth it. There have been certain aspects that I've learned and had to take that step back, and maybe, and that doesn't mean, right, it's going to be forever. That just means for this moment, I can't. I have to focus on myself. Maybe in the future something will change, and they'll view something different. And I have noticed, I think that's why I think the power of children is so beautiful, because children have such a way. I feel like when people talk about kids getting pregnant, all of that, right? There's so much they talk about in terms of complications, and oh my God, it's going to be so much more money to do this and do that, and whatever. But by that same token, right, with everything, there's the good and the bad. I also think that there's such a beautiful simplicity that children bring in. And I think it shows when you see those kinds of movies or media that portray, like, like the boy in the striped pajamas, right? Like, it doesn't matter to the kids where the hell they come from. All they care about is having a, like, they're playing, they're just two little kids, they don't see anything past that. And that, like, in the ways that they simplify life, and the reminder that that gives them. In that same token, I feel like the newest kids now in our family, my nephew and my niece, they are starting to help me break that for my parents, right? And other people in my family, to help them make that realization and make that connection, because now they're seeing how a different parenting style, right, is affecting them. They're seeing and they're learning as well, because this is not something that they knew, right, when they were growing up. Like, that was not the parenting style of the time. The parenting style that they grew up with was, you keep your mouth shut, kids don't talk. They thought they were flexible in allowing me to have a seat in the adult table and partake in their conversations, especially when they were just, like, talking shit. And they thought that was flexible and that was good parenting. And now they're, never in a million years did they think that they could sit a kid down, explain certain things that they would understand it. And now they're seeing that that's possible with their grandchildren. And so I think it's those little moments, and just, understanding the little bits that I can do, right? Because as I've mentioned earlier, there's also certain steps that I have to take selfishly just to protect myself. Because as much as I want to be, I understand that for me, part of that light is also helping my family. But at that same token, it should not come at the cost of my entire cup, right? If at the end of the day, this battle, right? It won't be the loss of the war, but if this battle is not going the way that I thought, okay, I'll take that step back. That doesn't mean I'm not going to make it to that light, but I'm going to have to change my plan, right? Or it might not be today, it might be on a different day. And so I think just when, like, part of that process for me is really sitting down, taking a look at the picture, and going through all the parts, all the cracks, looking at them, really understanding them, and most importantly, with those cracks, giving them the most tender care and attention, because they need it the most, right? It's the hardest to do because it is so delicate, but at the end of the day, it'll be worth it, because once that part is healed, then I can move on to another part, right? And that it may seem like a small little crack, but that small little crack could have been the reason the whole picture kind of dissolves and disintegrates. And so when I think about it, and I think about even right as I talked about before, like I'm in this space where I want to get a home and I want to build my home with my person. Um, and as frustrated as I am with all of the cracks and the bumps that are coming up in this picture, I do have to take that step back and be like, well, you know what? But at least that big part of that picture, the who, I found that person. The where, I know where I want that to be. The how, I know how I can get there. The when, I don't know when that'll happen. I don't know how much control I have over that. But I know what I can do. And what I've built really hard to make sure that I have is I can talk to my person and we can figure it out and we can do it together as a team. And I think a huge learning for me personally, and you know, Kat has mentioned it, is this idea that I don't have to do it alone. And that's, I think, where the light starts to grow stronger and it starts to go brighter. And like even tonight, right? Kat's leading the episode. And technically it was my turn, but I leaned into my girls, right? I leaned into my team. I let them know this is where I'm at mentally. I can't promise that I can do a great job. And then Kat offered to step up, right? In that same way, in different areas of my life, I have to provide these people that opportunity. And I feel like for the longest time, I've always felt that I have to take bleh, I have to take care of everything, right? I have to be the one to do it. Nobody else is going to do it. My parents are not going to do it. They don't understand all that, whatever. But then it's like, no, if I want this change to happen, I need to give them the chance. I have to explain it to them. And maybe it'll take them multiple chances. Like, take a look at a toddler. They're not going to get it right the first time. If it's something new, no one will ever get it right the first time. But if I don't give them the chance, if I don't even give them that opportunity, then I don't even have the right to complain, you know? So taking and putting that faith in my partner, who I have worked so hard to filter through and make sure that this person understands what it is that I need to feel better, to feel complete, and what is important to me in a relationship and what is important to me when we're growing a family. I have to trust them as well and let them do their own part, and put my faith in them and understand that this will be a partnership. Like, and that lifts a huge weight off of me, you know, of understanding like, no, I don't have to fix this problem of immigration alone. I don't have to quote unquote fix my family alone, right? My brother can step in. My sister can step in. My parents can sure as hell step in. Will it be hard? Sure. But will I have to show them how? Sure. But they can do it. They're capable. They're capable beings. They just haven't been taught how. And it's just giving them that opportunity and just, again, being accepting of what I'm okay with them and what I'm not, right? And I think that's a hard lesson that I've learned with friendships that I've outgrown in the past, is I have usually been too accepting, right? Like how, Kat, you were saying, you're like too giving, and interpersonal you may not receive the same that you're giving out. That's a really hard lesson I had to learn too. You know, like, who is really, and I want to say it this way, who is worthy of receiving my love, who is worthy of being in my life, because that is a really important discernment that you have to do and that you have to make, and that we all eventually learn as we get older, that you may want to be everybody's friend, but everybody is not going to fit your life, because not everybody is going to match your morals, your values. And that's okay. And that's okay also if your morals and your values change. You know, there are certain things that we grow up with, and then there are things that we learn. And then there are things that we learn that don't really fit with us anymore, or don't really fit with who we are becoming. And I think that that's okay. And I think that ultimately, at the end of the day, relationships, whether they be a serious, significant other, or friendships, or even familiar relationships, right? It's just all about the fit. With family, it's a little bit different. There's more considerations to take into, but even with family, like if the fit's not there right now, okay, then it is what it is. Maybe we'll be distant for this time period. Who knows if we'll rekindle again, but at this moment in time, this is what's the best decision for me, to be able to make sure that my cup is maintained, to be able to make sure that I am in a place where I am happy. And as as I literally was just telling my friend about his home, you're the one who has to live in it, right? You're the one who has to live your life, walk through those shoes. Nobody else has to live that. They have to live their own life. They have their own things to worry about. So just make sure that whatever it is that you're doing to get to your light, you're happy with it, that you really want it, that you took the time to think about it, and it really aligns with you. Because I think another fault that we fall into is, and also feel like this is part of the reason why people used to have midlife crises, and for us it's become quarter life crises, is oftentimes we'll be living the life that we think we want, and it's really the manifestation or the molding of what our parents want for us, or of what somebody else that we idolize wants for us, or what we think we want because of somebody we idolize. Take that moment. I really want to encourage all of you that are listening to this episode. It's so easy to live life on autopilot. It really is. Take that time to take a moment to step back, look at that big picture that is your life. And are you happy with every single stroke that's in there, with all the colors that are in there, with the style of that painting or whatever it is? Because you're the one that has to see it every single day. You're the one that has to maintain it and all of that stuff. And so make sure it's something that you're really happy with, because if not, you'll never get to that light, no matter how hard you try, because that light's not yours. Yeah.
Oh, that was a word, Pam. Thank you so much for sharing it. I mean, and there's so much growth that comes out of these times for us. I think that I said it. I said it right. I said that this was going to be a profound thought that we were all about to share.
Yes.
And I think in reflecting for myself, I would say that I have been leaning into who is there. I have so much love for my family, and in these more recent years, I've just developed the biggest admiration, adoration for my younger sisters. They're such a reminder of the fact that family is what you make it. And I am so, so grateful for both of them, because they not only are they my sisters, right? So they remind me of myself constantly, and I feel like I learn about myself through them when I see them, when I share life with them, when I catch up with them, right? When I see them when they're pissed off, and when I see them when they're like bouncing off the walls with excitement from whatever new revelation just happened for them. But most importantly, I see their innocence, which is similar to what you were saying, Pam, about the young kiddos. And I think that they're a different generation. They're Gen Z. Like Gen Z is super hard. And so when it comes to them, I think uh they are just so filled with love and life, and fervor for life. That's what I think is kind of missing from us, like millennials these days. Because I think also the thing about being a millennial, right, is that we grew up in the digital age at a time when it was our entire childhood. And so we all think that we know so much more. So we all feel old. We all feel old until we talk to a to a Y2K, and they remind us that we're still young as hell, right? And then we are like, well, you don't know what it feels like to be me now, and it's always that like tussle, right? Back and forth. And then you have Gen Z, who is literally like, I don't even know where Gen Z came from, but I am so grateful for Gen Z because they are just full of life. They're super upfront. This is all generalization. But generally, they're super upfront, super full of life, super confident, super willing to stand their ground and maintain their stance and be really, really firm on it in any way, in any direction about anything. And I need more of that. I need to feel more confident to voice how I'm feeling when I'm feeling it, right? To just say that I feel like crap today, or to just say that I'm upset with something going on in my life right now, right? As opposed to just sharing when it's a good day and when somebody asks me how I'm doing, how was my morning, just saying, "Oh, good, fine." We're the token it's fine generation, right? And I'm trying to break out of that. And I think that that's a big reason for why the seasonal depression started in the first place, right? Because as I shared, it was literally out of the fact that I was kicked out of not just a household, but an entire culture, right? When I shared that I was struggling with it. And that's a really hard thing to heal from alone, right? And I obviously didn't heal from it alone, but I thought I needed to for so many years. And so I think the biggest thing that I've overcome, like I said, is really sharing life with the people who are there, because the people who are there are the people who really really care about you. I feel like I've gone through seasons as well of resenting my partner, like thinking that he's always going to be there, and so right now is just a shitty time for me, and he's going to have to just deal with that, and kind of just take the brunt of how I'm doing, because I have too much energy that I'm giving to other people to make them think that I'm okay, that at least he knows me and he knows that this is how I'm really doing, and he's the one who deserves the my joy the most. He's the one who's been there with me through it all, who's supported me, who knows all of the in and outs. And in that darkest time, he was the only person who knew. He was the person who was there when on that day. He was the one who stayed with me all night to make sure that I didn't do anything crazy, and called me the moment that I got home, and talked to me the entire time that I was driving home to make sure that I got home safe. And it's crazy that for that period of time where I thought I needed to come out of it alone, I thought he was the one that I needed to worry about the least. And now how much that has transitioned. And I can say that the biggest growth that's come from it is recognizing that the only people who matter are the people that you matter to them. Those are the only people that you should be investing in. And when you meet new people, right, the vibe is important, right? And like, you don't give your energy to everybody because you don't have as much to give as you might have thought you did when you were younger. And I think that specifically with seasonal depression for me, right? Because I already mentioned that it resonates in the holiday season. I think I've also had to overcome a lot of those commitments, like not going to everything that I'm invited to, not, well, this has been a big one for a couple of years, but like not doing more than one party, in a day. Like, you just have to choose who your people are. And like, you got to be with your people, because you'll always resent yourself for not staying, and it'll always end up being a comparison thing. And it's like, well, yeah, why are you comparing it? You know who you really wanted to spend your time with, and it's your life. And at the end of the day, those memories are yours or no one else's. So you have to just be where you want to be. Life is too short. Life is way too short to spend time around people who do not set your soul on fire. And if you were to live your life a little bit more in that way, I promise you it'll be a little hard at first, because you probably still have that sensitivity towards the way that people see you. I do too sometimes. Um, but I can definitely say that I'm a lot happier now, accepting the fact, and I literally sent a text message of this to my friend today, that some people are going to think that I'm a bitch. Some people are going to think that I'm a bitch, not just because I'm a woman, but also because I may not I may not be as kind in their eyes as they thought that I was, because I'm a kind person and I have a radiant energy about me, and I'm aware of that because I think I work really hard to maintain that for my own self, right? For my own mental clarity. And that makes me magnetic and contagious to a lot of people. But that doesn't mean that those are my people. That means that those people want something that I have, you know? And so if they end up thinking ill of me because I'm not able to connect with them in the way that they're seeking, like you got to just put the shades on, you know, and you got to stick to your route, because I promise you, it's only going to make that seasonal depression that's already so stressful during this time of year even worse, because you're going to feel like, on top of all of this, these people that you have to connect with who have been a part of your life for X amount of years, now you want to try to make time for new people because you feel like they're lonely at this time of year. No, 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 no. Do not worry about that, you know, because trust me, they're searching too, you know, and they're searching for what sticks. And if they don't stick with you, you're only going to waste their time in the end. And yeah, I would definitely say that's the biggest thing of growth that has come from me throughout all of this. And I would love to hear how that's manifested for you, Tess.
I think growth is not easy when you're living this stage of seasonal depression. I think that's the last thing that you think of when you're like, I'm going to grow from this depression.
So true.
So I'm sure that's not the first thing that comes to, you know, anybody's mind. I think it's something to think about, because, you know, saying you're going to grow from this from the other end is a lot easier said than done. I would even challenge that I don't think there's any growth in my depression. I don't. I think there's probably a routine, you know, that I've identified. There's probably things that I've learned about myself when this kind of gets triggered, and I'm like, you know, okay, I'm learning that that actually matters more than, you know, I thought maybe when I was, I don't know, 22. I think it's hard, especially because coming from my life, and this is also for everyone there, like there is no partner. There is no family circle. There is no safety net. There is pretty much me and whatever I make of it for myself. So for everyone out there who's feeling the same way, like, you know, they're like, well, I'm just, you know, I'm here, I'm by myself in a city, or I'm just by myself, period. Right? I think it's hard to say, like, you know, well, I know what's going to come out of my life after this. Well, actually, I think a lot of us just wish this never happened. You know, a lot of us just wish we didn't feel this way. A lot of us just wish we could feel it in much shorter spurts rather than have it stick around for so long. I'm sure a lot of, I mean, you know, this is anybody, right? But I'm sure it's harder for people out there who, like me, you know, you are making your circle as you go. You know, there is no steady, I want to say partner, right? So you are your partner. And that goes to show, I mean, that's for everybody here, regardless of who you're with. You are your own partner first.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, but you know, for a lot of us, that's all we got. You know, there is no other person on the other side. It's we are still at our origin point of we are our own partner. And I think for myself, if I had to say anything about maybe not growth, but what is strong in this part of my life is, and it's a lot stronger now, is the concentration of doing things that, you know, from tradition, right? Like, you know, I don't have these people in my life, but this is what we would do around this time of year. So I'm going to really live that up. I'm going to strengthen it. I'm going to like broadcast this a lot stronger for myself, because that's what fueled me, you know, for years. So this is me now. This is still my tradition. Yes, that person's not there anymore, but this is still my tradition. So it doesn't rely on any one person. It's just you. So that's definitely a lot stronger in this season, right? In this potential, like, just you, right? What can you do for yourself? So I will always go to mass and look for a nativity set. Always. It was something that I loved doing with my grandmother and my great aunt. We would actually like go to church on Saturday nights, and there would be some amazing nativity sets in Catholic churches. Actually, there's a really great one in Aventura Mall that I discovered because, again, I was just doing the tradition for myself. And it was just amazing. It was really big and was basically like kind of emulating this own, like, I guess, kind of fictional hybrid realistic version of Aventura. And it was amazing, very big. I recommend seeing it closer to Christmas time. It's always there in Aventura. There's also like the tradition of just making something with sweet potatoes, because that's what my grandmother always used to do. Sweet potato casserole. I don't do it as well as she did.
We never feel like we do.
No, but and it's so funny because, like, if there's one thing about my grandma, it's that she's gonna survive out of Campbell boxes. Like, she did not know how to cook, really. She just she knew how to cook certain things, right? Like, she knew how to make impeccable rice. She knew how to make amazing pork. But if it came to like chicken soup, she was like, what's this package that I can do within like 10 minutes? Yes. So that was her style. But for somehow, some way, she really cooked the hell out of sweet potatoes, and it was always delicious. And she taught me how to do it, but I still can't. It doesn't taste the same. Cooking, actually, just in general, really strong. I think that's why my favorite holiday to experience is probably Thanksgiving, because it is so cooking based and it is so group based. And I remember when I was older, my grandma brought me in to start helping her prep for Thanksgiving meals. It was obviously because she was also older and she was very traditional. So she was like, the woman's going to help me. So that was me. And I would chop sweet potatoes. I would layer them with brown sugar, marshmallows, more sweet potatoes.
Oh, that's different.
Yeah, but you see, I don't know what she did. She did something very different. Alternatively, she would sometimes use yams, not always sweet potatoes. I remember that. But anyway, still can't recreate it to the full, abuela effect, but it's pretty damn close just because of the feeling, just because of the tradition, honestly. That's a lot stronger. And that I think I appreciate a lot more. It doesn't take a lot, I think, to kind of trick you and make you feel like this is all for nothing and you're by yourself. What does it matter? Super, super easy, right? Super easy to fall into a trap like that. And it's much harder to come out of, much harder to redefine, the parameters of what your existence is when you think that you're alone and nothing matters and, no one's paying attention. But I think any person could be doing yourself a real big disservice. One, because it's just plainly not true. You have no idea what any one person could be thinking of and what you're probably really wanting if you overcast with this idea that, your existence is nothing because no one else is, on the other side of the bed with you, or no one is like, calling you when, it's, I don't know, a holiday. I think it's, and of course, because we had mentioned this before, it's easy to fall into the traps because of, the ideas that were sold, right? Happiness, marriage, careers, things like that are kind of extensions of capitalism. And wonderful sentiments of building families and spending money on them. But honestly, as Kat was saying as well, there are new things, new rushes, new passions, new definitions of life coming even from the generation just right on our heels. I don't think you even have to wait for them to decide for yourself what else could be new and what else could be standard and what else could be much more meaningful than what was, defined as success, right? I'd like to, as you were speaking, as both of you were speaking, actually, I really started thinking about, damn, like, do I really want to say my answer? I was just like, look, I think it's, kind of hard to say what I'm about to say like after following them too. But I, again, thought about this version of this story is reflective of probably, again, so many people. And I do not want to be dishonest about how I feel and what my values are, because I think if I did that, I would be no better and I'd be a hypocrite about everything I just said. So I know it's could be, I guess it feels a little bit bleak, but I guess that's also because I'm still finding out that new foundation and what that looks like. And I can also be very honest with you and tell you that I'm not 100% happy with what it could be, right? There's still temptations of like, well, I have to find that person. I have to have kids. Like, that's how I'm going to be happy. But then there's like real moments that I sit with myself and I'm like, don't know if that's really it. I think even I, am human and am susceptible to the image and its glories, right? But truthfully, I don't think that's what sets my soul on fire, right? I think that's yet to be found, which is not a great answer when we're talking about seasonal depression and having, coming out of it. But that is my honesty, at the very least, for you all. Yeah.
And we love your honesty. It's why you're on the podcast with us. And it's also a great reminder, that I would never want it to come across that we are in any way romanticizing, hardship because of what you can get from it. Because at the end of the day, none of this is a choice, and I mean, it's why I'm not on a podcast by myself. I think all three of us can agree with that, because I don't feel like I have the full human experience. So if I were to only share my perspective, I know that there is an entire side of people that I just couldn't possibly connect with, which is what makes all of us so cool to have together. And I think it's a great reminder, Tess, that like if you were to really just ask the question of like, are you grateful, for feeling this way, I can definitely agree with you, and say like, no, I hated it going through it. And I hate when it happens every time. And it's like the worst part, of the holiday season is having to feel this way and not being able to shake it, and just kind of like feeling again my body sensing its way in before I can even think about it. So I think it's an amazing thing, and totally necessary to talk about for our listeners. And great way to close us on the topic too. And I'm going to start with this one. But the way that we'd like to close is kind of with the question. When we were talking about the outline, I mentioned bringing up the F word, and the F word here is fear, and I think it's the question of, do you fear this state?
Yeah.
And like, do you, if you're somebody who experiences this, and we're all going to share our own personal takes on it, but is this something that you fear, right? Because when it's coming, right? It's a feeling that all of us have had before, right? Whether or not it's happened again soon or that we're currently in it. But what's your relationship to that? Is it something that you can stand beside? Is it something that you have created space for because you know that it's something that you can't shake? And I would say that for me, um, I fear the unknown in it. I fear the fact that I don't know exactly what the future holds, right? So I would say, like, I, right, talking about finances, right? Like, I fear what my holiday season will look like and what I will be able to provide for my loved ones. And of course I know that if I was to ask them and let them know, they would say, like, no, 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 please, you don't have to but that's not the point. The point is how I feel in a way of, can I provide for the people that I love? And I would definitely say that in that way, yes, I do fear it, because I don't know how severe it will feel at its worst point. And the alternative side of that is that I think that in order to live a full life, you have to embrace all emotions as they pass through you. And so I do. And I try to, right? I try not to negate anything. And at the same time, life is so precious that I can't help but try my best, to be optimistic and to look at it as brightly as I can. And I really hope that that's not perceived as something like toxic, like, because I really don't believe in toxic positivity. I believe in the power of your own mind, and that it's your mind that put you here and it's your mind that will take you out. It's your thoughts, it's the things that you say to yourself. And I think that you can be in a certain place while still trying not to be, and as long as you're honest with both parts of that, I think you have space for both. I maybe it's the Libra part, being indecisive and not knowing if I'm sad or if I'm happy.
The scale, they say.
But I don't think it's just a Libra thing. I think that there are a lot of people who feel that way, and they don't necessarily just have Libra in their chart either. And when another thing that I had kind of asked, like, what are the benefits, of accepting our full spectrum of emotion and living through these moments instead of trying to escape them? I think that I did try to escape them for a long time. I think that I really tried to be that perfect friend who had everything figured out, who wanted to give you all of the advice, who felt like because of my experiences, I had lived a life before my life, and that I could speak truth into people's lives. And whether or not that's true, um, I just don't think I talked about myself enough, and so, like, speaking into other people's lives a lot, doing anything a lot is also kind of putting a magnifying glass on you and showing people what your real insecurities are, and so I would just say, that friend who always has great advice for you and always asks you questions, you should ask them how they're doing, because they might not even tell you if you ask, but I promise you, just the action of asking them is a step in the right direction towards that person opening up to you. Could be a year from then, but they'll notice that you asked that question, because I always notice when people do, as somebody who's like a very keen listener. I find that it's what I oftentimes do with a lot of acquaintances, and they'll end up thinking that they're a better friend of mine than I perceive them to be, because I know a lot more about them, you know? And I love listening to people and learning about the human experience from different perspectives. So, like, no shame, like, I'm literally asking you these questions. I just think it's interesting, when you look at your circle, and so I would say that it's kind of a way that I combat the fear, right? Is like, let me try to live vicariously through other people's experiences and other people's pain, and what they're going through to kind of like take me out of my own. But I think that even just kind of wanting to talk about this today is a step in the right direction. And I actually am kind of just adding it to my holiday season, of like, especially when I think about the broken family, because instead of thinking about all of the times of those lonely holidays in between, now I'm starting to think more of the memories before that, and I think that that's such a great sign of progress because it means that I'm out of that fog. I'm out of that dark fog of not being able to dwell on anything but the traumatic moments of my life. And now I can go back further, and I can think about the future, right? And about making new memories and making new lasting joyous moments that I can enjoy, because the end of the day, it's all about healing, and I really am working towards healing my relationship with this time of year, because I love the holidays, and like I want to reclaim them, and I don't want to have to wait until I have a child, so that I can like live through their joy. I want to have my own joy so that when they're a child and they're looking at me, they have nothing but reality to see. There's no facade here. Like your mother is genuinely happy uh in all ways, in and through the pain, right? She, I don't even know why I manifested a girl.
Vision.
But like, no, I want a boy actually. First. I don't know. Anyway,
The universe
topic for another
heard
time.
you.
But yeah, like that's ultimately what I'm aiming for here, is just joy in whatever form that takes. And I love that for me. And I want to be able to wake up on Christmas morning, feeling fulfilled regardless of what I have to offer my loved ones. And also being able to like surpass that too, and like conquer that, because I also recognize that what we dwell on, is like our keeper for better and for worse. And so like releasing myself from this feeling of needing to provide, right, financially for myself and for others, like what does it look like, to let go of it, and how will that help me to get myself out of it as well? And and yeah, I would say that that's how it's manifested for me. I actually want to bring it back over to Tess and see especially after what I said about how I feel about your response too, if there's anything you want to say on that.
Well, something that also came to my mind is that I was also that friend, honestly, that person you painted when you were like, the person with the that wanted to give you the best advice, that wanted to ask you questions, that wanted to live vicariously through you. I was like, that was me too. I wonder if that's also a Libra thing. I don't think so. Pam?
And I'm looking at Pam, I'm like, is it you too?
Was that you too?
We are on a podcast, so it could make sense that we all, well, actually, it wouldn't make sense because we just talk about ourselves.
Maybe it's
Now.
growth.
Yeah, that is growth.
That is growth.
Period.
Boom.
I think I asked, but not to live through that person. It's just to understand them.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like what we want too. Like we're like, oh, okay, we understand that now. Like, all right, that's a sector of life. Yeah. I think as you just laid it out, I was like, yeah, that was me too. And I don't necessarily know. I guess how that played out in my roadmap to being too caught up with or just missing out on like what I have to say and what I'm living. But I do think that it definitely, I don't want to say lessened, but I think I took value in what was going on in other people's lives more than mine because of it. I was like, yeah, like my friend's going through this breakup. Isn't that terrible? Like, well, I don't know Tessa, you just fought with your brother. That's pretty shitty too. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. So I think I paid a little less attention to what was going on with me, and it just magnified what was going on with, especially in middle school. Did you feel like it was really powerful in middle school?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh my god.
No, I think those were the worst times. Those are the times that I think I was talking about dwelling. Those are the memories that I dwelled on. Or the middle school memories that I couldn't get past. I couldn't think before them.
Yeah. It's very true. Like, I think my middle school memories are surrounded by like the kind of drama that happened with, like, the friend group that I had, that again, I always wanted to give them the best advice. I wanted to, be there and be present for them. And that's like consumes my middle school memories. Yeah. I have obviously a few other ones that were just me, but that's like 80% of them. Yeah.
I'm super curious to know, because of your response, if fear is present for you because of how you feel like, again, very, very valid and true, that there's no direct growth out of a state of depression.
Yeah, I guess I will say this disclaimer, that I think there's always fear, because of I kind of am living in this state where I know nothing has really changed in the past 10 years. Like, yeah, have there been things that have made it worse recently? Yes, but if I'm being honest with myself, I have had this feeling like being at home with my direct family. They were right there, and I still had these feelings. Like, everything was so jagged and so unfulfilling that I would, even back then, like, spend like Christmas and holidays like with friends, and that was more fulfilling than being with my family. That sucks to say out loud. But it's true. It's true. It's true, because I hate for somebody to think like, family isn't fulfilling. That's not it. It's more, I'm sure, as we're kind of repeating here, a very case by case scenario. You have your own variables to work with. I had mine. So yeah. But yeah, fear is definitely a factor. Maybe because of that reason, But I definitely do make space for this feeling every year, because I know it will happen. I make space for her. I try my best to, land her gently. I wouldn't say that I can, shake her hand or tell her that she's great, but she is sitting with me. She is beside me. Because I made space for her there. I'm very aware. Sometimes she can overwhelm me. Sometimes I can control it well. But I will be honest and say that, to me, she is, for right now and for the time that has passed of my life, a very guaranteed presence. So, unfortunately, it kind of feels like just a truth that I've been living with for a long time. And that's the sucky thing about a feeling that is not a truth. It's not a fact. It comes to your mind because of, where you're at, what you're surrounding, or, what time of the year it is, right? Because that's the whole point of this topic of the day, right? Is that this feeling, this thing, can come from an event. It can come from a holiday. It can come from a stage of life, like Pam is describing. It can come from nothing that is guaranteed to change, but you're going to try your damnedest to do it. Now, I can tell you, right, that some things for sure I have changed and that it has helped it. But I can also guarantee you that unfortunately she comes from things that are facts for me. Like, I won't have a Christmas ever again with my grandma or my mom. And that's just a fact. And she comes from there too. So I know she's gonna come. I know she's gonna come. I know that she's gonna sit there and look at me, be like, yeah, I am here because this is still true. And I try my best to not make it a bad thing. Death is part of life. So whatever is, happening with me and with this presence that comes to me, it's not unnatural. Death and mourning is not easy, and it does not go away. Take it from me. It does not go away. So there is, I think, a way of being with it, but there is no getting rid of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's important to recognize too that even just coming to that answer is something that a lot of people who could be going through exactly what your life story is, who are still chasing in the opposite direction of it, though. I think there are still a lot of people out there who don't make space for it and pretend like it's not there and deny and say it's not going to happen this year. Nope, I'm over that. I'm past that. That's not a thing for me anymore. And I think it's a lot of people who deny their life story and think that they can rewrite things out, and pretend like this doesn't bother me anymore. This happened so long ago. How could it possibly? And all the time you hear of how things like that resurface later on in their lives, and they realize that they never dealt with what they were feeling and that they never grieved, and again, it can also manifest physically for them too, not experiencing those things, and they can give themselves actual ailments that are all related towards something that happened to them when they were younger that they never took care of and only fought for years. And so even if I don't know when, Tess, you decided to create the space and, kind of acknowledge that this is just a wave, a never ending wave that will continually come back, but it's huge, and it's definitely huge for me to hear.
Yeah, I also like that you yeah. Hold on, sorry. My mind is like losing it now. It was something you just said, but then my mind just went.
But it's the wave. Was it the wave?
It was right before that. Damn it.
Creating space as opposed to denying.
Being the person running away from it. That was also me. Quite clairvoyantly, that was also me. Maybe 6 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. So that was me too, guys, everyone listening, and if you're running away, it's okay. That's also part, that's well, I hate to break it to you, but it's a mistake that everybody makes, because it's worth a try, I guess, right? It's worth a try fighting that fight and, running the other way and building the guard up. But I am also in the field of cat, where I think that hurts you more than it helps you. I think it's turning facts of your life into fiction and then kind of destroying a bit of yourself. I hate to be dramatic, but I think it's true. Yeah.
Thank you for putting a button on that, Tess. And I did figure that there was a struggle at some point before coming to that, because I think it would be almost like superhuman to create space before denial. I think it's part of the process. Very organic.
Impossible.
So now I'm going to pass it over to Pam.
Oh,
Pam,
boy.
I'd love to hear your closing thoughts, but Pam is also our clairvoyant. on the podcast too. So I'm actually going to invite you to close us out with the topic and also seamlessly transition into the
Yeah.
tarot reading because I know our listeners are
Seamless, because she flawless.
great.
Sure.
But yeah, I know that our listeners are eager to hear what the cards have in store for us tonight.
Yeah. So for me, absolutely there's fear, and it's for reasons that Tess just stated. There's not just seasonal depression. I've had depression in my life. And so the fear comes from, will this ever be something that will go away? You know? And I also am somebody who's reflected a lot in my life in terms of life, right? Like actual life, actual living. I reflect a lot on death itself. I am horribly terrified of aging, and not for the reasons of, not for like physical reasons, right? Like not for vapid reasons, but just the idea, the thought of growing older and waking up and being, like I don't think I generally handled the transition very well from childhood to early adult, and then from early adult to adult. It's always been something that I've thought about, that I'm like, no, like, what do you mean I'm not going to school anymore? Like, what do you, like, what does an actual adult life look like? Like, what do you mean we, now we just work? Like, what does work look like? What does a fulfilling work look like? Um, and obviously I've said it a million times, what does life look like in a context after coming back from Japan, um this idea that I thought this goal of mine that was going to take forever and a lifetime to accomplish, and I've done it, and the mystery and the wonder and the intrigue that got me so excited for life, I've seen it, and now it's almost like, I don't want to say the rose gold glasses came off, because I loved my time in Japan, but now it's almost like, now what? You know? And um I think because I often contemplate on death in that sense, it's, in a way, it's almost, I have not mentioned this in a podcast, but I have mentioned it in conversations with these ladies outside of recording, that I think about it so much sometimes that it's almost like, what's the point of all this effort? Right? Like I think that to a certain extent I am very aware and understand that I could die tomorrow, or I could, like, who knows, somebody that I love could die before me. And I think the way that I handle death outside of me, like, I understand that it's a natural process, right, of life. And so I don't think, like, the most recent death that I can think of is my dad's oldest brother, who was like an uncle that we fairly recently reconnected with because I was going to Japan. And when his death happened, like, I was sad, but it wasn't that kind of painful wailing mourning, that I see other people go through. And I often think about, what would happen when my parents pass, and like, how is that going to change, and how would that feel, and how would I feel, or what would happen if I pass, like, how would other people be feeling? um and I think because I think about death so much, that's why this seasonal depression is absolutely terrifying for me. um because it starts bringing in those thoughts, right, of, and you know Kat mentioned that part of depression is this idea of apathy, and I think also it's this idea of, what's the point of living, right? Like, what for what reason is there? But then there's just an interesting different side to it, because I also think about life as well. And I think about all of the different things that we, specifically as humans, are so blessed to experience, right? That maybe other animals, other creatures, whatever, other living things do not. right? Or the ways in which we've evolved, and how interesting is that? And all of these different, like, I love learning about different cultures, different languages, um, how those cultures change and adapted. And so there's also this aspect of life that I have an appreciation for, and it's a constant cycle that I just am always living through, very similar to like how Tess was explaining, right? Like, she knows this seasonal depression is going to come again, and and there's that expectancy for it. And so I have an expectancy for that, in and how it manifests itself outside of seasonal depression, right, in other ways. And so I feel like I have made space for it. Sometimes I feel like maybe I make too much space for it, and it gets a little bit too comfy. And I have to remind myself to start thinking about the aspects of life again. Um, but it's always an interesting battle for me, and I think that's just how it's going to be. I've recognized, I've been able to learn more and to recognize some of what triggers that, and to try and help and avoid them. But that doesn't mean they're not going to come. And so I think it's just the best ways in which I can prepare myself is also knowing what helps me get out of that. And that is most definitely surrounding myself with friends, surrounding myself with people that I love, surrounding myself with family. If I need a trip to go see, my niece or nephew, to remind me like the beauty that is life, and what is still yet to come. And I think it's I feel like I've kind of mentioned it in episodes in the past, where that wonder of a child, because you don't know so much about the world, gets lost, because now as you're older and through experiences, there's more that you've learned. And now it's like the food scene here in Miami. You go to one nice fancy restaurant, all of a sudden they're all the same. They all have that grass wall with the neon sign and the cute little photos of the food, and really, like, you're gonna spend $50 just to find out it's the same mediocre food, until you find that one good restaurant that actually has decent food. And so,
And they're a hole in the wall in Alapata, and they're run by a family.
yeah. And and then it becomes a little bit mundane, and then that's where that aspect of depression comes in, right? Like that apathy, that I don't want to say lack of appreciation, but it's almost not, it doesn't ignite you as much anymore. It's not, I don't want to say fulfilling either, but it's just something that you think, okay, like I've done this already, it's not going to be that much more different. And then those thoughts of like, what's the point, come in. And I think that I was just thinking about how I wanted to phrase this. There's also been times where I think about my life, and I'm understanding the things that I would hear from older people. And one of the things that have really been sitting with me, um, is when they talk about their life in terms of, oh, that was a lifetime ago, or that was such a different time, like that was a different life. And when I think about it, I'm like, yeah, especially as somebody who has lived really a different life in a different country, I feel that to the core. I feel it in my bones. Like, it's something I will never ever shake as somebody who has had that lived experience. And so that concept, that philosophy, is something that will always sit with me and grounds me, for better and for worse, right? It grounds me, it humbles me. Sometimes it pulls me a little too much into the ground. Um and so it's such an interesting dance that I do with this fear, and with making space for it. And it's that fine balance between giving myself the opportunity to honor my emotions, but not allowing myself for them to overtake me, you know? And one of the ways that I think I do that help with that, and I think is part of the reason why, when you were talking about kids, the she came out, is I always have to remind myself, and one of the best ways that helps me snap back into reality is I picture myself as a kid. Like I picture little Pam, and I've mentioned this before that in a podcast episode, that this came from a time when I was doing yoga on one of the YouTube videos from Yoga with Adrian, where she had asked to just hug yourself, I think. And then I just pictured myself when I was, I want to say 5 years old, with that bowl cut haircut. And, I just have to look at her and remind myself, like, this is who I'm doing this for. This is who I'm living this life for. This is the person that I have been fighting the depression for. The little girl who thought the world of the world, and then slowly that world started crumbling. Like, this is who I'm doing this for. Like, this is not something, I'm not doing it for anybody else. I'm not doing it to appease my parents anymore, because that's what it was, right? A lot of my life decisions were about making my parents happy and all of that. Now it's like, no, um this is gonna come, but I have to make sure that I fight it for little Pam, to make sure that she's okay, to make sure that she doesn't feel this way again, to make sure that she doesn't um feel alone, feel like there's a loss of hope, because there is so much life out there. There's still so much more that little Pam hasn't experienced yet. There's still so much more that little Pam has to offer. And when I think of it in that way, like that is what starts to bring me into a place where I make space for her, you know, and I make space for how her emotions and her feelings have evolved. But then I make sure that at the end of the day, I don't let those feelings overcome me, because I don't want her to be crying all the time. I don't want her to be stuck in a dark corner this entire time. So I have to make sure that I pull her out. And so this also to say, into transition, I was thinking a lot about what I wanted to ask the cards. It was really difficult because I feel like a lot of the tarot reads that I've asked have been on the similar spectrum of how can we listen to ourselves? How can we pay attention? How can we drown out noise? How to really bring the focus back on ourselves. And this time around, one of the things that Tess had mentioned, I want to ask the cards, right? Like, we've talked about seasonal depression. A lot of us, all of us have shared how that shows up in our lives. What are some of the ways that we've learned, made space for it, and all of that? But what really stood out to me, at least, was this idea of showing up authentically, right? That hard part is the step after denial, is that acceptance. It's that understanding of, like, okay, this is what it is, and really being honest with yourself of what that means, right? It's accepting that reality. And I think that is the hardest step, right? Like they say it, like, somebody, you can't help anybody who doesn't want to help themselves. And so how can we get there? That's what I want to ask the cards. How is it that we can show up authentically for ourselves, so that we can be honest about what is affecting us, whether it be seasonal depression, whether it be depression, whether it be whatever else, you know. Uh because we talk a lot about reflection, we talk a lot about how reflecting can help us, but in order to get to a moment where we can be reflective, we first have to do the hard part, and that's be honest. So, how can we be honest with ourselves about what the reality of this seasonal depression is? What the reality of what the seasonal depression is trying to show us, trying to teach us, what the reality of why it keeps coming back? Like, how can we be honest with ourselves and understand that part of ourselves? Because really, it's kind of how we've been talking about it, right? Like, Tess personified it as herself. I feel like we all did. And even in the podcast episode, that when we were talking about manifestation with our wonderful guest, we talked a lot about shadow work as well, and how that is a part of who we are. And so I want the cards to help guide us, to maybe provide some insights into what that would be. And and for those of you who are listening, that are in this moment with us, like we we wanted to talk about this because we knew it was important, and we knew we needed to make space for it, and it needed to be heard. But it is really hard, right? And so for those of you who may be in this space, that it might be too scared to be honest, it might be, maybe you're still in that denial phase, like, I want you to know that, yeah, it's not easy. um but it's just little steps, and we're here and we're talking about it, and we're hoping that our story helps you feel heard, helps you feel seen, because I think that that's really important, and that's one of the biggest reasons why me personally, and then I learned all of us really wanted this podcast, which I thought was a beautiful alignment. We want to create that space for you, that safe space, because that safety, once you feel safe, I feel like that's when you can really feel okay to essentially break down, you know? So the first card, okay. The first card that came up flying was the Ace of Swords. And then the card that I picked out was the Devil card. And on the bottom of the deck, we have the Two of Swords. So, like I said, right, this is not easy. And a lot of the times it's going to feel like, what do I do now? Like, there's nothing. It might feel hopeless. You might feel like you're at ends meet. There's, the Two of Swords. This person has two swords crossed in front of them. It's often the card that shows indecisiveness. They have their eyes blinded, and in my opinion, this almost feels like the denial part, right? Like, no, I am not depressed. No, I don't want to look at it. And then what came flying out was the Ace of Swords, and this is kind of showing this opportunity. It's the ace, it's the first card in the deck. This sword is being held by this hand that is coming out from the clouds. It has a crown on its head, and it's like the start of communication, right? Because sword energy is all about mental energy, it's all about communication. And so when you're in such a space that is denial, that is indecision, where there's so much uncertainty, right? Because they're sitting also in the Two of Swords, they're sitting on something, but they're right in front of the ocean. And I feel like the ocean is such a beautiful metaphor for the unknown, right? It can be truly scary. There's an alluring beauty to it, and sometimes this feeling can have some enchantingness to it, right? This feeling of denial, and like, no, that couldn't be me. It makes us feel good. That's why we do it, because we think better, right? We think better of ourselves. But at the end of the day, this person's just going to end up being sitting there, refusing to kind of acknowledge. And then the card that I pulled out with my hand was the devil card. And I think that when we're in this place of not wanting to be honest with ourselves, we start leaning into vices, right? We start leaning into that escapism. We start leaning into all of those things that are distracting us, that are chaining us to this, what's the word that I want to use? Dystopian perspective, right? Like it almost like that denial is a feeling and a place of dystopia. Like you think everything is so great, but it's really not, it's blinding you even further. Like, you know what the reality is and you're choosing not to. And that's when you start feeling even more bound, even more hopeless, even more chained and helpless. And you start like fighting and fighting, and you're gonna be, as you're sitting there with the two swords, you might have two swords in your hand and you think, no, I'm good, I got this. But you're blindfolded, you can't see what you're swinging at, you can't see where your target is at. And at the end of the day, what's pulling the chains is not you. What's pulling the chains, what's controlling you, is the denial, is this idea of giving control to outside sources, outside substances, rather than you being in control of that. And I'm just going through the cards now, and I pulled another card, and what came out was the Two of Wands. And I think it's just really interesting that we have two, and then behind that we have the Three of Wands and the Magician. And in terms of how we can be honest with ourselves, in terms of how we can shift from this place of denial to now a place of acceptance. For you, for those of you listening, it might mean broadening your perspective, however that means to you, whether it be travel, whether it be learning about other people's stories, whether it be reading other people's stories, whether it be speaking to someone in conversation, because the Two of Wands is all about travel and the beginnings of a journey, right? There's this person who looks a little bit more regal, right? Maybe they look like they might be an advisor of some sort, and they have this globe in their hand, they have the staff that they're holding, and they're looking out into the ocean, into exploration, and they have this sword behind them. And then immediately after, we have the Three of Wands, which kind of shows, right, that ascension, that moving forward, that progression, even from the one to the two of swords as well. Um, and I think something that will help with this, for those of you who may potentially be in this place of indecision or denial or not sure, the Three of Wands, this guy looks like he came from a journey, right? He has these two wands behind him. He still has the third one that he's holding. He's looking out at these boats, but he is looking out at the ocean in a different way from the Two of Wands, because the Two of Wands is almost looking like as wonder, as like getting ready to start this journey. The Three of Wands, I almost feel a more somber, morbid, um acceptance. Like that's what I see. Like he's looking at the ships, he's done that journey, and he knows that ocean now. Like he knows what that trek is, what it takes, and how much it took from him to traverse those waters. And so they're like, even if you're going through this, and or if it's come back and you're thinking, why is it coming back, why is it not leaving, I think it's a really good reminder that even if it's come back, it's not the first time, like you've gone through this before. There is something that you have learned, whether you notice it or not. Those two wands are behind you. Those experiences are there with you. They're there to help guide you and help you understand better. There's a different perspective that you have of the world now. When once you learn something, once those that blindfold starts getting lifted, once you take that glimpse, um the world is not the same. It is going to change, it is going to shift, it might be different from when you first started. Even I talked about how it felt like something that was so wondrous, um and now it almost feels like, look, it's the same ocean. I know what that looks like. I still think that it's a journey worth going through. If at the end of the day you're in this moment where you're not sure, you think, no, I'm going to lean into my vices, take that opportunity on yourself and just try the sword. Like, it's there, the opportunity is there. I promise you. Like, really take a look at your life, really take a look at your surroundings, and try to see where that hand is showing up for you, that is holding that sword, that is saying, I will hold the other one. You don't have to hold both of them. That is saying, there is another way out of here. It doesn't always have to be, let's say, going out partying. It doesn't have to always be going out drinking. It doesn't have to always be, whatever distraction you're using to escape from this reality. It doesn't always have to be that way, you know? And then, to kind of reassure that, we have the magician immediately after, the three of wands, as well as the king of swords, and justice. So to me, it's almost like the magician is here to remind us that at the end of the day, you know, the decision is yours to make. Justice is here. Whatever decision that you make is going to have an impact on your life. But at the end of the day, it's your decision. You have that power. You can transmute that negative energy. You can choose to stop leaning into that escapism, to stop leaning into those vices, and choose something that will get you to this place of the King of Swords, of this, paternal, masculine energy that is sure of itself, that is holding the sword proudly in his hand, and is sitting upon his throne, no longer with the blindfolds on, understanding that he doesn't need two swords to fight, only needs the one that he received from that hand, that was there for him all along. And the justice card is here, sitting very similarly to the king of swords. They're both sitting upon their throne. They're both sitting with a sword in their hand, in the same hand, in fact, with a crown on their head. And then the only difference is that the justice also has the scales of justice on the other side. So I think that the justice card is here to really remind us of that fine balance. Okay, because ultimately what we had originally was the two of swords with the indecision, ace of swords on one hand, the devil on the other. Which path am I going to take? You can take the path that will lead you to go into the king of swords, but don't forget, there's also the path of the devil. And that balance, it's up to you to decide where those scales are going to lead. And the reason why I say you, listener, is because the magician card is here. Nobody can pull one over the magician. Okay, the magician has the infinity symbol over his head. He has his wand. He has every single symbol in this card. He has the cups, he has the wands, he has the swords, he has the pentacle. He has everything. He can do whatever the hell he wants. He has the magic. But there's good magic and there's bad magic, right? There's blood magic, there's negative magic. Even in like witchcraft, one of the things that they talk about is, like, I think it's called the threefold rule, that when you do a negative hex or something, a lot of people believe that be careful when you make that decision, because it can come back towards you threefold. So that's why I say be very careful with what it is that you're deciding, with what it is that you're leaning towards in terms of that escapism. Because even though there are these cards that are coming in here, right, and are saying there is this possibility for something good, I don't want us to forget that there's also the possibility to stay stuck, and whatever decision that we make, I think that the Three of Wands that's here, that's kind of looking out and looks, this to me, this guy looks a lot more experienced, a lot more learned, a lot more wise. Whatever you decide will have an impact on your view of the world, you know? So be very careful with what it is that you decide. And I hope that you decide with us today, tonight, this morning, whenever you're hearing us, to pick the path that will lead to the next step, right, of this mourning, of this, the next step to get to that light, which is the acceptance, moving past the denial, moving past the escapism. And have the hope and have the faith that you very much are capable of doing that. Because I feel that when we get in this energy, in this headspace, we oftentimes think nothing can happen, or it's outside of our control. And the cards are most definitely reminding us it is completely within our control. And whatever the result is 100% a manifestation of our decisions. So that is what the cards have for us tonight.
I think it's really crazy that you literally pulled the devil on your shoulder. I think it's a great read and a great reminder of, everything that Pam just said, so I don't want to repeat. But just such a powerful read today. And I think it's going to leave a lot of you all feeling very seen, which is all that we aim to do, I think, with our podcast. It's why all three of us misfit young adults are here together just to speak our truth and hope it lands with the right people. So that being said, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. I think it was exactly what we needed, and I hope that it's something that you can take with you as well. May it give you a little bit of sameness as we head into this holiday season. Luckily, on this Friday, the 13th, for us, it seems like we avoided any crazy things, aside from the devil popping up, which was cool, because he was just, I think he was a friend today, a friend with a reminder, of that there are,
the devil is the Capricorn card.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you've mentioned that. You've mentioned that because we pulled the devil several times now in our reads. And a reminder of our choices. And that being said, I wish you all very well this holiday season. Stay tuned for some frights and fun from us coming up as we enter into our favorite time of year, spooky season.
Spooky.
Oh, yes.
And you can rest assured that there is a series coming your way. But we won't give away any more spoilers that we already have. So if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends, like it, listen to it on any and all platforms, and please, please, please let us know what you thought. Let us know what parts connected you to us the most. We'd also love to hear anything private. If you want to send us a DM or join us on the Discord, just sharing any part of this that might be connected to your story as well. You have no idea how fulfilling that would be for us to hear, and how much we like to share those stories between ourselves, no one else, about what you have experienced as well, because you are our fourth person on our podcast. So stay tuned. More guests coming up later on as well. And be well today. You deserve it, for no one else but yourself. We'll see you soon.
Bye.